20 years. Overweight and obesity has become really an epidemic across this country. It's been cited by a number of people, including the American Public Health Association, as the biggest crisis really facing us because of everything that comes out of here. I want you, by the way, to look at this map carefully. The darker the color, basically, the greater the obesity. And you can particularly see in 2008 what has happened. In the southeastern states, there has been almost no movement toward smart growth, new urbanism, walkable communities, or anything of this type. And these are the communities where obesity is running rampant, and according to several national directors of health from different agencies, has become an epidemic in these areas. As of the year 2000, about 6% of Maryland's population was judged to be obese. Now, by the way, that's not the same as overweight. That number is much higher, but we'll just talk about obesity here. We know that overweight and obesity are major risks for a long list of diseases, including diabetes and cardiovascular problems and so on. The total cost of medical treatment to deal with health impacts of obesity in our state alone is an extra $1.5 billion a year. An earlier study estimated that medical treatment for health impacts of obesity and overweight was 9% of all medical spending in the United States. We know that one of the reasons our waistlines are expanding is we really don't have easy opportunities to squeeze in exercise. For many of us, exercising becomes a safe way for us to drive to the gym. And if you notice where the gyms are, I mean, they're all in these regional shopping centers and things like that. You drive to the gym, you get on an exercise bike, you turn on a video, which in many cases is actually a video about some great outdoors. So you show people walking and all this sort of stuff. In places where walking and biking makes sense, where there's safe sidewalks and bike lanes and real places to go, and exercise and transportation all become part of the same thing. We save time, we feel better, we save money on health care. You know, and it really does come down to what you do on land use and planning. I was working with some people in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, one of the few jurisdictions in the Southeast that are really trying to do something, and they took me to a parish, equivalent of a county, right outside of Baton Rouge, and they were showing this new office park, of which they were very proud of the design, and it was doing well financially and so on. And I'm looking at this office park, and it was very interesting. It was all office. I was there about noon, and I see lines of cars coming out. And they are going to a restaurant park about a mile down the street, and there's no sidewalks on the street to walk, and the street itself is 6 lanes across. Now, as I'm standing there talking to some people about it and looking at the cars and all, I can tell you some of the people in those cars needed that walk after lunch every day. But what they have done is, instead of mixing the use so it's all in the same place, and instead of focusing on sidewalks and walkability and things like this, they've forced people to get in their cars to do something as simple as go to lunch. Now, I could talk about physical fitness and health in relation to community design for hours, and in fact in other places I have done so, but let me move to the third problem area, that of housing. The housing market excuse me, has shifted long before the recent collapse of the lending industry. And here is what's really happening. Grover Kohler cites some of the work of Chris Nelson, Arthur Nelson, now at the University of Utah, and Robert Lang from Virginia Tech, 2 excellent sources. But if you look at the households, what you will see that in 1960, roughly 48% of all households had children. That number was down to 33% in 2000. It's now down to right about 30%, and in the next 2 decades is expected to drop to 26%. Now, what that means is that 3/4 of the households are not the typical household for which people are building and planning in terms of subdivisions. And so if people want traditional subdivision with the 2.4 children in the backyard and so on, that's great, but 3/4 of the people of this country are not the same people. Basically, we're getting older, living longer, delaying marriage, and having much smaller households. Again, won't go into it here because of time, but one of the big challenges is the aging population to be able to live actively and successfully in a community that's based on isolated subdivisions. 2/3 of the residential housing stock built in the last decade was typical single-family detached housing. If the next 70 million, if you want to go to the next slide, if the next 70 million housing units needed for the next 100 million people follow the same pattern, we could be heading for a major mismatch in what people want and need and what the market is building. And as some of my builder friends tell me, it's not just that they go out and say, well, I want to build this regardless of what people want or the market or whatever. It is that the system is geared that way, and that's what the zoning is, and that's what the planning does, and so, why fight everything? Go build another subdivision. If you look at the mortgage foreclosures by county, and I use this one across the country, but you all in this room know these counties. It's very, very interesting. This is other metropolitan areas as well. But in metropolitan areas like our own, so many others, the housing slowdown is not affecting the market in areas that are closer to job centers and to transit lines. Neighborhoods with good transit access in the core of the region maintain their value, even as houses in the far auto-dependent suburbs lose value. Now, this is a little misleading because it has whole counties. But if you broke down the county, like Montgomery County or Prince George's, what you will find is if you are in walking distance of transit and or good jobs, your value has held and even increased, and foreclosures are dramatically less. Look at the two, Loudoun and Prince George's County, on the bottom and what is happening, and that is getting worse. Where I started politics, city of Hyattsville, has a commuter rail on one side, has a metro station on the other side, and they have a whole new urban townhouse section, $250 million investment going in this town, and those homes are selling right in the middle of this recession, and they're selling in part because young people are coming in and they're buying them, and they can walk to the commuter rail or they can walk to the metro, and within 2 stops, they are downtown at the nation's capital. This is the type of change we're seeing across the country, and it's what we should be looking to in the future. Again, I don't want to go in detail here, but let me absolutely guarantee you that within a couple years after the world recession is over, gas will jump up to $4 a gallon again, and the Wall Street Journal, certainly not a bastion of liberalism, has projected that within a decade after that, we're likely to be looking at $7 a gallon. Now, you tell me what's going to happen to Loudoun County and Prince William and places like this all over the country at $7 a gallon. The rising demand for this type of product that we're talking about here is being drastically underserved. It's still not for everyone, of course, but there is a large part of our population that would like to live somewhere compact and walkable, but finds the price premiums that are placed on them because of undersupply makes it very difficult. Now, that sounded like an academic statement, but all that's saying is there's enough demand that when you get a really super community, whether it's Bethesda or whether it's Silver Spring has emerged over the last 10 years, or whether it's where I live in Annapolis, what you find is everyone wants to live there, and it drives up the price so much that the demand makes price unacceptable for so many of our citizens that want the same thing. All of this points toward the fact that a single-family dominated planning design of the last 50 years is likely to be ineffective in handling much of the next 40 years of growth, and most importantly, spelling certain disaster for climate if we continue that way. This sector plan moves Montgomery toward many of the smart growth goals. For all of the great things that are contained in the plan, though, I have one word of caution, of major caution, and that is, as this plan moves toward implementation, it will be critical, first of all, that there be in place a mechanism to guarantee the delivery of the transit that is promised. Secondly, it is extraordinarily important that there be a major focus on design guidelines in general for the county, but specifically for this plan. You know, Americans are interesting. They know what they want in land use. They hate sprawl, and they'll fight against it, and they hate density, and they'll fight against it. and do very effective on both of them, which really then says, well, how do you get out of that type of total stalemate? And the key, I believe, is design. Well-designed density is critical to achieving the plan's goals. Let me just real quickly give you a couple of examples. This is Detroit, Michigan, a city towards which we all aspire to live sometime. But there are reasons why it has a reputation. This was their effort to increase the quality of life by increasing density. And the truth of the matter is it's not very well done. Please note that it's 33 units per acre. Now, if you go to the next one, this is Back Bay area of Boston. If you also notice, though, this is 37 units per acre, greater than what you just saw. And this has become densely populated, walkable. People even pay money just to go and visit the Back Bay area. Unfortunately, also, though, it has become one of the most expensive communities in the country because of the demand for that kind of living. Or if you go to the next one, what we call auto-centric design. This is in Huntsville, Alabama, and they were very happy that they had created a certain density level. But if you look at that, there is no place to go, no place to do anything other than get out of your condo or your apartment, get in your car, and drive this crazy maze that they've put there, and proceed to perhaps a park or a workout gym or something of this type. Instead, we have all kinds of people-centric density achieved through design, areas that for the most part you know. And by the way, this chart is not just for here. I use this across the country. But if you go to these places, you see people walking, you see activity, you see the type of design for people. The bottom line is that you really need to be vigilant to ensure that as the plan is implemented as intended, that a strong design standard assures that resulting places are truly walkable, livable communities. Now, I have framed these remarks in terms of national crisis because there's a real connection between what happens here on the Pike and how our country faces its future. Same type of decisions going on all across this country. One thing that recent economic crises have made clear is that decisions we make as individuals, as land use planners, as local officials collectively have tremendous impact on our economic, environmental, and physical health both here and nationwide. Many of the development and home buying choices we have made in the last 50 years have been directly guided by and sponsored by the federal government, the subsidy that comes from the national government. And many have been very poor choices. I'm pleased that the Obama administration recognizes the role it plays in community health and is poised to provide new leadership to support visionary work like the White Flint plant. This opens exciting possibilities about federal support for this plan, especially for transit and walkability, areas that the national government has been almost missing in the last decade. I do not want to ignore the immediate important benefits the plan would have for each of you who live and do business here. The Maryland Department of Planning estimates that of the 1 million people who will be joining the state in the next 20 years, more than 190,000 will settle right here in Montgomery, the 200,000 you mentioned. Where they live and how they travel will have an impact not only on your community, but the entire region. In my travels around the country, usually someone pipes up in the question and answer portion of it and says, basically, how did we get here? How do we do this? How did the Rockville Pike get to what it is now? Well, the answer is that no one really sat down and said, we want sprawl, we want congestion, we want streets that no one in their right mind would try to cross. We want the beauty of Rockville Pike. No one really did that. But the landscape, or hope not, the landscape that we have today is a result of incremental decision making. One shopping center, one highway project, one zoning variance, repeated over and over for decades. Wouldn't it be great if our children, sitting perhaps in this same spot 25 years from now, in a world that is virtually unrecognizable to us, instead would ask, how did this great neighborhood come to be? And the answer would be that way back in 2009 and 2010, the citizens of Montgomery County had a vision for a future and created a plan that would indeed make it work. I believe that can be the heart of this plan. Thank you very much.